When did that rich kid lose all his wealth? So, I used to know this kid whose father was a political figure. Everyone knew he was quite corrupt and made tons of money, but we used to live in an Eastern European country, so things like corruption were quite common. He used to spoil his kid with everything, like most rich parents do. He wasn't a bad guy or anything, but he was always so arrogant it just got on my nerves. He basically had everything financially settled for him, but this wasn't enough. He used to hang around my neighborhood and people would make fun of him because he was short and all that. Your typical bullying scenario. So, what did he do? Well, he figured that he should start selling weed because that would get him respect in the neighborhood and the respect will be enough to live up with his arrogance. So, this kid who basically had everything that he desired and was always bragging about it, risked his freedom trying to sell drugs just like all the other poor people because he thought it would be "cool." That was the perfect recipe for disaster. It took about a year and a half until he got caught. The fool was selling to an undercover cop. Obviously, the agents were more interested in him because of his father's political exposure and the amount of attention the case would get. After the investigation, he was given 2 years in juvenile prison. Some years after that, his family was still under investigation for different corruption allegations of his father. So, it goes that the father was jailed afterwards being found guilty of political corruption and taking bribes. You can sort of say it was a like father like son type of scenario. I guess the point of the story is to be happy with what you have, and even if you have more than others, don't brag about it. A loud mouth can easily be shut up. I had this rich kid in my school, one of the most arrogant people I knew. You know the type, the silver spoon brat who didn't need to work for a thing in their lives and thought the world revolved around him because he was spoilt as a child. From what I known, his dad used to make a lot of money back in the days when he was working for a big hedge fund in London. He had everything. A nice Mercedes at 18, holidays paid for. Every year he used to go to places like Paris and Switzerland. You know, the ideal scenario. The problem was not that his parents were rich and he was enjoying the money. That's only normal. We are all working hard trying to provide the best life for our children. The problem was that he acted like he owned everything, like he'd done everything by himself. Many people started to notice that and told him that he's way too arrogant and that he wouldn't have anything if it weren't for his dad. All of that was true, of course, but as you know, truth can really hurt people. So, he wanted to prove everyone wrong. So, he bought this fancy trading course because he wanted to learn how to play the stock market just like his father did. I've heard he maximumed his dad's credit card to fund his trading account. He had this so-called trading strategy that would triple his investments in 3 weeks. That trading strategy was basically putting all your money into a cryptocurrency and getting passive gains from that every day. He put all his money in BitConnect. He lost everything after the first week. We haven't seen him around school after that. Months later we've seen him working at Burger King. He told us that his father is no longer giving him any money and asked him to move out of the house. What's with people who already have everything but want to ruin it all? Just be humble. Flipping burgers might teach him that. Most of the friends in our circle turned 18, and it was the time for getting our license and trying to flex with our cars like every other teenager does. Most of us didn't even have our own cars and we used to borrow our parents' car when they were kind enough to give us their keys. However, some us had the luck and money to own their own cars. So, it was the case for my friend, Paul, who got an Audi RS for his 18th birthday. Truly a beast of a car having more than 400 horsepower. Definitely, way more than a teenager needs. Either way, we had this spot where all of us got together on weekends. He used to show up revving the car that his folks got him trying to impress everyone. This one night it was raining, so a couple of my friends were practicing drifting. Of course, he wanted to join to show us how it's done. All said and done, he pushed pedal to the metal, turned the wheel and lost control. There was smoke all over and we barely saw him, but we heard a loud noise and then we knew that he messed up. He smashed his rear bar of his precious car into a pole into the parking lot. One of his wheels came off and basically the car was unable to run because of this. There were tiny pieces of metal all scattered across the ground and the airbags popped. Luckily, he hadn't suffered any injuries or anything. However, after that, he was always walking to school. Also, we stopped seeing him in the weekends as well. Probably the only car he was riding in now was his Uber. I remember this kid back in high school who was really popular because his parents were rich and lived in a mansion. He used to make fun of other students who brought lunch boxes to school because they couldn't afford buying food from the canteen every day. Once I saw him going to this girl I knew. Her father died in an accident, so only her mom was sustaining the family and gave her $50 just like that, saying, even poor people should be able to enjoy some pizza every once in a while. This should last you a couple of weeks. I wanted to slap him, but I didn't want to get expelled because I know his dad and the principal were good friends. The thing is, he didn't even do as a good intention. He was just trying to impress this girl from class. What a horrible human being. That's why we didn't talk too much, because I don't like arrogant spoiled teenagers. I remember that on his 16th birthday he invited us to his mansion, well, his parents' mansion, because he wanted to impress everyone. After inviting everyone over promising a good time, when people started to show up, he had sent them back home saying that they are not dressed fancy enough and their poor taste will ruin the photos. Again, I wanted to slap him so hard. Years later I found out that his father died, unfortunately, a sad incident indeed. As soon as he found out, both him and his mother, the wife, tried to come up with the paperwork to inherit the mansion. They had to go through a bunch of lawyers and draft up numerous paperwork, but all with no luck. His grandpa told him that he is not actually his child. He done a DNA test when he was born to see if the child belongs to him, but it turned out he did not. The wife was fooling around apparently. At the time, the father was too preoccupied with his business in order to find time to sort this out. So, he just played along, pretending to know nothing of his wife's affairs. His grandpa refused to sign the papers because the arrogant spoiled kid didn't belong in the family and neither did the wife. They ended up renting a crowded 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, the only place they could afford. Now when I see him, I feel like giving him $50 so he could afford rent. Knew a guy who had a brand new Range Rover, one of those fancy expensive editions. The SUV must have worth like $50,000 or something, which is insane. The truly crazy part is that this happened when he was 16. And they say all people are equal. Anyway, his spoiling went on in many ways, through college and beyond. Now he's a loser who parties like he's 19 with a job he got through daddy's connections. He is in his mid-30s with a failed marriage and no friends. I don't want to be harsh on him, but the guy is so arrogant and always has been. I'm sure he will burn all his inheritance and life up. Such a shame. There were 5 high schools in my district. The one I attended had the average income of above $100K per household, while the other schools were close to half that. Over the course of 4 years, I can think of multiple cases of rich kid syndrome. However, this one takes the cake. The kid was an older freshman and became one of the first students to get their learning permit. Parents immediately purchased a BMW with all of the bells and whistles. Within 4 months of having the car, the kid got multiple speeding tickets and of course got into an accident that messed up the car for good. Parents bought another car, not as expensive, but had numerous extra features, on their 16th birthday. Took half a year before getting into another wreck. Parents sold the car to get another one. This car was a considerable downgrade from the previous 2 cars. This car lasted the longest before the kid got a DUI at 18. His parents sold the 3rd car and sent their kid to rehab. Once the kid went to college, private school, they purchased him another car. This was last I heard from the kid, but I'm sure he will find a way to mess it up again. I was best friends with this kid during first years of high school. We were literally such good friends, shared our lunches, shared the same bench during classes, talked about girls. You know, your usual stuff. One summer after school year finished, he told me he would be away. Apparently, his dad had this new business deal that had to take care of in Dubai. So, I will only get to see him at the beginning of the next school year. I was truly gutted that we won't spend the summer together like we usually did, but I understood the situation. When next year started, I saw him showing up in a brand new car wearing fancy clothes, which is not like him, because he used to be really laid back about all that stuff. I approached him to say back quote hello, and he instantly dismissed me, saying that he shouldn't hang out with people poorer than him, because it is just a waste of time. I couldn't believe my ears. How can someone change so drastically in such a short period amount of time? I was absolutely shocked. I tried to approach him the next day as well, asking if everything is alright with him. However, this time I was met with complete silence. I couldn't stand his arrogance. In the middle of the school year I stopped seeing him around school. Thought that something terrible had happened, so I've asked my teacher if he heard anything from him or his parents. She told me that my backquote friend abandoned school because he was not able to afford it anymore. We went to a private school. I found that really strange at the time. Why would someone exhibit that rich and arrogant attitude if they are poor? I found out months later, while reading a news article, that his dad was found guilty of fraud. Apparently, he was involved in some sort of pyramid or Ponzi scheme that would fool investors to chip in their funds, but then never saw a return on their investment. Truly low stuff. His father was failed for 7 years and the son, my colleague and ex-friend, was jailed for 3 years because he acted as an accomplice to the whole fraud. I can't believe the stupid things people do for money. The truly ironic thing is that he couldn't even enjoy the money because they were dirty. Make sure you send out a positive message to your kids. You know when you spot that someone has a problem, like an addiction issue for example, but you simply don't know what to say to make things better? This was the case with a friend of mine. His parents were filthy rich. I mean, like oil rich. His dad was a self-made millionaire in the oil industry and his mom got an online shopping business. Essentially, he was alright as a teenager, but everyone kept telling him that he did not earn his money and that he does not deserve all the nice things in his life. I found that a bit harsh, that he was judged like that by people that didn't even know him. Anyway, in time he sort of developed this complexity that he needs to work for his own money and not depend on his parents' funding, which I found truly remarkable coming from someone who didn't need to work a day in his life because everything was sorted for him. However, I think he wanted to prove others more than to himself that he can make his own money. All said and done, he got a job that required no experience because he didn't have any anyway. He started as a waiter in a restaurant because it was the only place that would hire him. After the first week he got fired because he used to turn up late for work. So, he discovered another way of making money and this was through gambling. He used to go to poker nights and play the roulette with the pocket money his parents gave him, which was around thousands of dollars. When you don't think about the things you have to lose, your gambling gets better, I guess. After his first winnings he started to act all arrogant, claiming that he made all his money from his business endeavors, which was obviously untrue. When I've confronted him why did he lie, he simply told me that I should shut up and that he will hurt me if I tell anyone. My friend had changed because of money, and he didn't even need that money. It all escalated when he got into a massive gambling debt because he lost a couple of $100,000 on poker. I told him that he could sell one of his 3 supercars to pay for the debt because otherwise some dangerous people will get to him. Obviously, he didn't listen, and just like any other responsible gambler would do, he doubled down on his money. So, he went on stealing all the gold from his house. His mom was really into jewelry and bet on it hoping he would be able to pull through. He lost it. He lost everything, and now he was in trouble. This was the last time I've seen him. He wrote me a letter a couple of months later apologizing for the fact that he was so arrogant and how this caused him to go down his path. He also told me that his dad keeps him on a monthly, limited allowance now until he learns how to manage his money and so on. Why is it that we always want more when we already have everything?